Hi,
Ryan,
Jaku.
thanks for making time to have this discussion with me on demand planning and material resources planning. Um, Before we get into it, I wanted to do a bit of a background, like just who is Ryan and why you have experience in talking about this for fiscal. Um, Tell me a bit about yourself. What was your first, let's say, real job after school?
Yeah, so my first real job, I was a brewer's apprentice, I suppose. That would be the first real job. Before that, I was just waitering and delivery driver and things like that. But yeah, so I was a brewer's apprentice and yeah, worked my way up a little bit and became a production manager.
Is that where you, when you became a production manager, where you got pulled into like operations and supply chain and those type of things?
I think what really, as soon as when I became a brewer's apprentice, it was for a very small company, not too many staff. I think there was like 4 or 5 of us. So lots of different functions within the business had to be held by many people simultaneously, or so there would be one person who wore many hats, and so I would be interested in these other functions of the business, like supply planning, demand planning, and just the overall operations of the business. I think that's where I got really interested in it. And then about I think two years into that, I realized this is what I'm really keen on.
Interesting. Where does that interest come from?
I'm probably a bit of a control freak. I like to have control over a system, and make something work efficiently.
Controlling things around you, right?
Yes.
And that leads into operations and demand planning and supply chain a lot.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, cool. Tell me, and what made you join fiscal?
So I was in the brewing industry for several years, and realized that I think I have a bit more of a passion for the financial aspects of an operation or a business. And I hadn't really touched that. I hadn't really tickled that part of my brain yet. I was more on the operations and the physical, not really thinking too much about the upstream of the accounting and so on. And I thought, that's a skill that I really want to hone in on. So financial was something that I really wanted to get into, and fiscal offered the opportunity for that.
And tell me, since joining, how many implementations or business systems overhauls or customer engagements have you been involved in?
Probably, I would say around 20. Been involved in probably. I mean, if we're strictly saying if I've mentioned anything during a project as being involved, probably around 30.
Wow.
But ones that I've taken large ownership over, around just over 10, I would imagine by now. Yeah.
So basically, the teams are split, and sometimes you're a lead on a project, and sometimes you support on the project.
Correct. Right?
Yeah. Okay. So you'd say like 30 projects we have been involved in, of which 10 you were the project lead.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, coming into this world, how do you think your hands-on experience in the trenches, learning while in a 4-team or 5-person team, wearing many different hats, how has that translated into being more on the, I would say, implementation side, not being hands-on, but it's a different vector of entering the market?
Yeah, I think you consider more than what is just on the screen in front of you or in that's written down. I think you consider the broader aspect of what is operationally going on in a business, and how much capacity does one individual have to hold a certain role, or that needs to be completed during any function of a business. Whereas, I think, if you can look at a smaller business and accept that there are multiple hats to wear, and it's possible because of the scope of the work, or you can look at a business that is a larger business, that one person cannot, with any sane brain, hold responsibility of multiple hats. Yeah.
Interesting. And, how important would you say, coming from a startup environment or a smaller SMB space and being interested in operations and supply chain and, taking on demand planning and MRP, how important is that to the survival of inventory-based businesses?
Yeah, so I think I've experienced sort of two sides of it. I worked for a really small brewery, and I worked for one of the larger breweries. The small brewery, there's a lot of tribal knowledge. Like you kind of, I think, you can, at one point in time, one person would know what was going on, right?
Just ask Steve.
Yes.
Steve knows it all.
Exactly, right? But when you get into a bigger company or a bigger operational organization, like I said, you can't wear as many hats. You don't know everything. So you there would be a lot more of designation of responsibilities in that regard. And so keeping your finger on the pulse there and having a designation of responsibilities for your inventory planning is vital to the success of the organization. And having maybe a dedicated resource for managing that.
But why?
Well, if you don't have inventory, you can't sell, right? I think it's as simple as that. To know what inventory you need there's a lot that goes into this, right? And that's why MRP as a I suppose like a methodology exists, right? You consider what is your demand, and you plan it. You plan accordingly for it.
Because the underlying principle is if you don't have inventory,
you can't make money.
Sell.
Yeah. And then your business goes under, right? Yeah.
The most expensive is a stockout.
When you
actually spend so much for a customer
to
arrive at your doorstep. You do the marketing, the sales team is there, the customer is ready to buy, they've got cash in hand, and then you don't have stock.
So you can't convert to revenue.
Tell me, what gets you really excited about this space?
As I said earlier, making sure that it works, right? I'm a bit of a control freak. Just having reliable data and just seeing everything work, right? Like I find it fascinating when the whole chain links up to each other. You have a trigger on the one side that leads to the very, very smallest movement on the other side, and everything works in harmony. I think that's really what gets me quite excited about MRP. Having all of these variables and balancing it. It's quite fun to play in this space.
It tickles your control freak.
Yeah.
You actually love it.
Yes. Yeah.
Interesting question. Now, you joined Fiscal because you wanted to see the financial impact of that as well, and learn more about the finance side.
Yeah.
And what more have you learned? You've taken your current experience that you've developed in the trenches, and you've now been exposed to the finance side. And what is the key takeaways that you've got since then?
Debits and credits. No, it's. I think there's a lot more that I didn't know or realize what was going on in the background. How you achieve an accurate set of books from your operations is quite something to manage. And I think having the right tools in place makes that a lot easier. But I think it was never really a consideration of mine to think of goods invoiced not received or goods received not invoiced. The status of an inventory, in what is it a work in progress? Is it in transit? Do I hold it here? Is it a finished good? Or, you know, all of the cogs that goes into selling a product, you know, landed costs. Those were never considerations of mine. And I think it's opened my eyes to how important it is to consider all of the functions, not just like the baseline operation of a business, but all of the, I would say, like, not tangent, but auxiliary items that occur during an operations that impact your books. I think that's what I found really fascinating to discover while being here.
Yeah. And now involved in customer engagements that you've seen, do you have any, I would say, horror stories that you want to share of people that like is getting it wrong versus and others of, you know, possibly people getting it right? Without naming names.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing maybe the biggest frustration for me from my control point of view is getting a stockout. You know, putting systems in place, making recommendations, you know, having all of the data available to you, but still getting a stockout. I think that's one thing that, like, just, you know, is a bit shocking for me. And then, yeah, I think the other side of it is also like just like making it too complex, like overcomplicating the process, and you know, is all of this detail really necessary? You know, I think it swings on a pendulum, like, you know, where are we in the amount of complexity? But yeah, horror story, stocking out with data present is like confusing for me.
But it seems to be that there has to be a balance, because, you know, you spoke about all the aspects you haven't considered, you know, and how that impacts the financial side of the business, goods invoice not received, landed costs, all these things that needs to be brought into your material requirement, your material resources planning. And but on the other side, you just said not making it too complex. So it kind of sounds like you have to find a balance.
Of course. You know, like I said, it is a balancing act between all of your variables. But limiting your variable complexity is quite key here, so that it's still operational, right? And if you're, like I said earlier as well, if you're wearing many hats in a smaller business, it's somewhat achievable. As soon as you get to a larger business, a larger organization, larger turnover, and inventory run through, it becomes more complex, right? But then handling that complexity by boiling it down to simplicity is really the key.
Because I mean, I've seen, and you probably as well, you know, you've seen business systems overhauls or systems implementations or operating procedures that are implemented that fail.
Yeah.
And I've always, not always, I mean, but I pin it a lot to sometimes it's over-engineered. The process that you're suggesting, like, you know, you get excited about all this data that you can get and how it should be applied.
Yes.
And then you start off by taking on too much, and then the project fails. So there's almost like in this process of getting to you know, demand planning and material resources planning, there's steps along the way that you have to take. It's like starting little bit by little, you know, not starting with doing the whole over-engineered process, trying to implement it on day one.
Well, you can't do that if you can't trust your data, right? So I think what you're trying to say is we need to be able to trust our data and set a very solid foundation, and then trust that so that we can then run a material resource plan.
So that's interesting. So okay, you just said you need good data to run a material resource plan.
Yes.
How long does it take to get to good data? And what is the procedure, like the process involved?
I think it depends. If you're a smaller business, you wear many hats. You have this tribal knowledge, this intrinsic knowledge about your product. You can make off the cuff calls about what demand is forecasted, for example. But if you're a larger business, you need to have really strict set points and variables that allow you to do that. But for a data set, like a timeline for a data set that is trustworthy, I would say at minimum 6 months. Like, and that's also not really even taking into consideration seasonality, because every business has seasonality, right? And you can't be measuring seasonality without all seasons, right? So to have really good trustworthy data, maybe 2 years.
Wow.
That's really solid data. But I think arguably you could come right with with 12 months of data. And if you're really pushing it, maybe 6 months, but 9 months.
Why does it take so long? Like, why is it such a process to get to good data before you can do material resources planning?
I think it's all about trends, right? So it depends on the approach as well, right? So if we're doing proactive material resource planning, we're looking at what do we anticipate sales to be. If we're using reactive material resource planning, we're looking at what sales do I have to fulfill now, right? What is past due that I have backlog of, and what are the sales that are coming in through the door now that I have to plan for today, right? If I do reactive planning, I've got long lead times, it slows my operations, my customers might not be so happy. So there's a lot of downstream effects with reactive planning. But with proactive planning, you need a solid sales demand forecast. And that just tells you your run-through rates, right? Or expected run-through rates of your products. And in order to get accurate data for that, you need to see trends. And for trends, we need a lot of data, and so I think 6 months, like I said, seasonality doesn't really you're not taking seasonality into consideration there. But if that's not too much of a concern, then 6 months should be fine.
But you need to have 6 months data at least, or 12 months data that is clean before you can run. So, I mean, there's this piece that we find ourselves in a lot of times where there's not even clean data beforehand.
Yeah.
And what is the procedures then to say, okay, get from a mess to clean data that I can start planning?
Yeah. So I think ultimately we need to know if we're working on the movements within my organization, sales, transfers between warehouses or co-manufacturers, purchase orders with my suppliers, I need to have a very good handle of what my moving parts are, right? So my transactional data needs to be 100% accurate. This means that all purchase orders are accounted for and accurate and up to date. All my sales orders accurate, up to date. All of my transfers up to date, and all of my production. Yeah, huge accuracy thing, right? And that's all on my transactional data. The second portion of this is your I would say your foundational or static data, which is like your product data, your suppliers, maybe your supply rules, for example. Like how do I get product A that has a subcomponent from a co-manufacturer? There's so I need to make sure that supply chain is accurately laid out, and that is held on a bill of materials level or a product level, right? And so that's the foundational data that needs to be accurate. So we're looking at your lead times, the suppliers. We're looking at minimum order quantities. We're looking at reorder points, reorder levels as well, because a supplier could have a minimum order quantity of 500 units, and if I only need 250, supplier is going to say, sorry, can't fulfill your order. So we need to then say, okay, cool, we'll order up to a minimum order quantity, right? That sort of thing. So that's the foundational data. So I think recap: transactional data and foundational data just needs to be 100% accurate, closed off, and
we'll never be 100%, but close to command control freak, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so but I mean, you mentioned a lot of things now.
Yeah.
You started off with sales orders that needs to be accurate and up to date, and purchase orders that need to be accurate and up to date. You mentioned transfers, accurate, up to date.
Yeah. Assemblies.
Well,
production.
but before, I mean, your inventory, like inventory counts, you know.
Sorry, that's actually one I forgot. I just assumed it's correct.
No. I mean, is it ever? You know, inventory stockouts. Like you need to really know what do you have on hand. Then you started talking about assemblies. Like, what is the current assemblies that you have? You know, we're already sitting at 5 points. That's just knowing what do I currently have and what's currently in process.
Yes.
Okay.
100%.
Now you talked about, you said bill of materials.
Bill of materials.
Okay, what goes into assembly? You need to really know.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then you said, okay,
with that, it's wastage, it's units consumed, it's, if we're looking at like production, it's time, it's resources, it's capacity. So yeah.
100%. Okay, but it started, you said foundational.
Yes. Sorry.
That sounds like
well, it's
one level up.
Yeah.
Okay. Vendors, you know, so the suppliers, who supplies what?
Yes.
What is their lead times? You know, how long does it take if I email the supplier, if I send them a notification to say I need this product by, when will it actually be received? You spoke about minimum order quantities on a per supplier level. So like per component, which supplier supplies that supplier's lead times, what's that supplier's minimum order quantity? Okay.
Yeah.
And what am I missing?
Well, supplier pricing, but that's supplier data. Yes. So we've got lead time, minimum order quantities, reorder levels.
Reorder levels, yes. But that's our internal. That's
an internal metric. And then, I swear, like minimum before reorder. So like, what stock do I want to hold before I have to order, given the lead time considered?
Lead time considered.
Yeah. So yeah, if it takes 2 weeks to get 200 units, I want to make sure that I have, you know, at least maybe 3 weeks or 4 weeks of runway. By that I mean I need to have 400 units of stock before I place my 200 unit order, for example.
Okay, 100%. So let's assume. So I've got my transactional data that we mentioned is up to date. I know exactly what's going on, and then my foundational data is accurate and up to date. And like we said, that also takes a lot of time, because what you spoke about foundational data, I've seen, like, I've never taken on a customer that have that ready.
Yeah.
It exists, again, tribal knowledge somewhere.
Yes. Steve knows.
Steve knows.
Yes.
Right? Especially if in a smaller operation.
Yeah.
And it's about getting Steve to write that down and put it somewhere.
Yes.
Okay. But I haven't even started planning yet.
No.
Okay. So how do I get from this to a material resources plan?
I think once you can, so we're talking about having trusted data.
Yes.
Right. So we're trying to set that up. Trying to set up a trusted data set. And then once we have that, I think those are all sort of the missing pieces, or the pieces that go into a successful material resource plan. But we also need to consider, like I said earlier, the sales demand forecast. Right. Okay. So we're looking at proactive planning here. And that would take into consideration what we think we're going to order. What we think we're going to sell. And then we can tie all of that together. So if I anticipate next month that I'm going to sell 500 units of product X to keep it simple, product X, it follows the chain going down into what components make up product X, right? Do I have all of those components in stock? If not, let's place the orders based on our minimum before reorder quantities, our lead times, the supplier set prices, and so on. And that tells us what is the best case scenario for the outcome, which is to fulfill the demand.
So let's use an example. I mean, next to us there's a black chair.
Yes.
Okay, right?
Yeah.
And that chair has got, you've got the seat, you've got the armrests, and you've got the wheels at the bottom, and you've got its frame.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's like 4 components. When I have seat, armrests, frame, and wheels. Okay, yeah. So that's 4. So we're selling chairs. Use that as an example.
Cool.
And you start off with forecasting, you say demand forecasting,
Yeah.
basically saying how many chairs do we think we're going to be selling in the next, how many months would you suggest I start with?
I think that's a loaded question because it depends, right?
Yeah.
It depends on the product. How long does it take me to produce the product?
Okay, 100%. So let's start off with 12 months.
Okay.
A year. I mean, most businesses can understand that. It's a 12-month plan. And I'm using it as an example because I really want to illustrate the process that goes into it. So let's say 12 months, I have to plan, I want to sell. It's easy to make money in Excel, I always say. So let's say $2 million worth of chairs.
Yes.
I start there. I say, okay, $2 million worth of chairs. And we sell them for $100 each.
Okay.
$100 each.
Cool.
Okay.
So
go.
Sure. Okay. So the question is, how far ahead do we plan? Or
the question is just an illustration of what demand planning is, right. And then how do we get from I'm trying to paint the picture of how do we get from transactional data with foundational data to a material resources plan.
Okay. So transactional data is telling me what is in motion, right, at any given point. And that will tell me what my base level, my net level is at this point in time. Do I have more sales?
Okay, so let's say we've got. Sorry to interrupt you, but I'm thinking, you're probably in this scenario. We're going to be selling 20,000 shares over a 12-month period. 20,000, and if we split,
I would split it by month.
Split by month.
Yeah. So, how much data do we have? Do we have 12 months?
Well,
do we have 24 months?
So I'm starting. If I'm thinking I'm a company, or I'm a chair selling business, right? Yes. We're just starting out, and we 1 year in.
Great.
And I'm planning for 2026. Imagine this was January or December. I'm looking at the forecast. I'm saying, okay, my personal target is I want to sell $2 million worth of chairs next year.
Cool. We're planning in December.
It seems a bit too late.
Yeah. Okay, so we're planning in October. Cool. September even. We're looking at our ambitious goals for next year.
Okay.
We're saying, cool, we want to sell 20,000 units. I would split it up maybe by month. So I would look at, we're looking at around 1,800 about per month, 1,800 units per month. And what is required to do that? So the components that make up my chair is the seat, the frame, the armrests, and the wheels.
Yeah.
So if I'm looking at 1,800 units, for argument's sake, just to make numbers easy, 2,000 units, there's 5 wheels in there, so we need 100,000 wheels, right? Sorry, 10,000 wheels. So we need 10,000 wheels for month 1, for every month going forward as well. And then we need 1 of each of the rest, right? There's also a bunch of other things that go into this, right? Packaging and so on, and I need a plan for that as well.
We don't ship chairs in its current state.
No, you don't. You want to flat pack it, or So there's that component as well. So what is the BOM? So this is that BOM accuracy question, right? But so we split it up. So we know that we want 20,000 for the year, give or take, 2,000 per month. Let's try to target that. So let's put it in an order. Also, we want to be conscious rather of cash flow, right? I can't now just go outlay 20,000 units of chairs in cash flow and just hope that I'm going to sell it over the next year. Let's try to bring that down a little bit and plan as little as we can to run as lean as we can for as long as we can, right? And so
as little as we can,
as lean as we can,
as lean as we can for as long as we can.
The first two are basically the same, aren't they? Little and lean, but
as lean as we can for as long as we can.
Yeah, I want to be trading my cash for inventory to be turned over to cash again pretty quickly. So I would look at a monthly order cadence, for example. If that's maybe too large, we can bring it down to bi-weekly. and start processing those purchase orders from my suppliers, right? Bringing it in as every 2 weeks, for example, as those new components come in, assemble, pack, put it into my finished goods inventory, and start selling. So we have this then moving chain that kind of just feeds itself, right? If we then start seeing that there's fluctuation on my demand, so I've got more demand than which is where we want to be. I've got more demand than I anticipated. Then we just start increasing our minimum requirements, the minimum reorder levels, for example, right? And we start updating that way, right? Or maybe it's just once off, and I just amend the purchase order to my supplier. Just Steve knows, right? So it depends on the size, right? But then if we start to see it going down, I would bring that down as well, or hold on to my inventory for longer.
Interesting. Something you spoke about just now that made me think about, we talked about foundational data, we talked about transaction data, foundational data. We now have a forecast plan, and now it's kind of, it's starting to work and you're putting it in. That fourth level, you mentioned quickly, assembly time. How long does it take to put a chair together?
Yeah.
How many chairs can we put together in, my garage that we're selling out of, right?
Yeah.
How many can I do?
Yeah, exactly. So and that's built into your assembly. So if it's a consideration, which it should be if you're manufacturing, right? We do want to plan for capacity, and that goes into our production planning, which is slightly different, but very much the same. We need to know what I need to produce and how long it's going to take me to produce that, and what I need to produce it. So there's like how long, what do I need, and when do I need to buy, and then we can start planning capacity that way based on our resources.
Because that is a consideration. If it's another variable that you have to think about, if we're targeting 20,000 units next year that we want to, and we've got supplier minimum orders and lead times, and now I have to add the variable of how long does it take me. So it's not necessary that moves into we said minimum order level, because it's not just about the supplier lead time, it's my own production lead time.
Correct.
How long do I take to do this?
Yeah.
And if you're doing several different products, which is, I'm out of the chair analogy, but doing several different products, there's a lot of things to consider. That you might do manufacturing runs, or production runs, and you can only do one product at a time. I can only do my chairs, and then I can go to my green variable, whatever that different product is.
Correct. Yeah, and that capacity is it's based on your resources, right? So if I only have a couple of people assembling the boxes, and my maximum capacity for the month is 1,800 units, I can't actually do more than that. So then I need to start looking at so there's a bunch of variables that start to trigger different outcomes here. So I mentioned if my order quantity increases, just increase production, but it's not as simple as that. We need to consider the capacity. If it's lower, what are the levers that I can pull to mitigate any downstream effects?
Which is interesting. You spoke about it. You touched on it. Also, is the cash flow implication. And then how do I've got this very beautiful plan. So we've got a material resource plan now, right? You would say in theory what we've put together.
Yeah, I think so.
And now there's a spanner in the works, and it's like, okay, but we can only afford to buy 5,000 frames.
Cool.
Or we need 10,000 wheels, but we only have enough cash for 8,000 wheels. So that's kind of where the finance and the operations really start to interweave and interact.
Correct. Yeah, and you can only really find that out if you have all of that data. If you have all of this foundational, transactional, forecasting data that leads into your financial data or your reporting, you can then determine your cash flow. right?
100%. So we spoke about you need this and you need that, in which, what systems do you currently use to do that in?
Well, Cin7, yeah, Cin7 Core. It has a really quite beefy MRP module, and all the.
When you say quite beefy, what does that mean?
It can handle a lot of variables, and a lot of input and output. So it's really nice to play around in, and look at what it suggests based on the variables you've given it.
Yeah. Okay, and I mean, if we talk about the transactional data piece, does that also fit into Cin7 Core?
Yes, yeah, of course. So the MRP takes into consideration your purchase orders. There's a lot of toggles and levers that you can pull to generate a specific outcome that you're sort of leaning towards. So do I consider draft purchase orders, or do I not consider draft purchase orders? Only authorized, or that sort of thing. So it considers your purchase orders. Then you can plug in. It considers your transfer orders, or your assembly orders, and your production orders. These are the transactional data that we've been talking about, and then you can also feed it your sales demand forecast report. Right. So Cin7 has its own sales demand forecast report built in based on the sales data that it has from your instance. Alternatively, you can build it yourself, right? So you can generate you can get a template, and you can tell the MRP what you anticipate, which is that Steve knows, right? Portion of it, rather than relying on the system, because maybe the system doesn't have full context because it's new, right? Maybe we don't have 2 years of data in it. So it takes the sales demand forecast report, takes all of the transactional data that we have authorized, in progress, or in draft, and then it looks at your foundational data, and it says, okay, cool. Based on these movements, my ins and my outs, and what I have available, what do I still need to get out of this? What do I still need to do in order to satisfy this demand?
So interesting. So it's end to end, right?
Yeah.
And we started with transactional data, the inventory on hand, and sales orders, purchase orders, inventory on hand, assemblies.
Yes.
That's dealt with as well. Transfers.
Yeah.
We spoke about. Then you said supplier lead times, minimum order quantities, our production lead times. So all that exists within the Cin7 Core instance.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, and then you put that into your MRP.
Well, the MRP natively reads it.
Okay, it reads all the data, and it basically is the coming together. But that's the point of it. You have to have the foundational,
yes,
and you have to have the transactional up to date before you can even attempt.
Yep. Otherwise, garbage in, garbage out. If your data is not accurate, your demand planner is not going to be accurate. And then you can run into some serious problems if you trust it.
Like a stockout.
Like a stockout or a cash flow constraint. You overpurchase, you run out of money, and the orders aren't coming in, your order to cash is not happening as fast as you want it, maybe, because you've overcompensated in the one area, because you had bad data. And
Interesting. And tell me what's on top of everyone's mind. When you speak to anyone at a function or wherever you're out, how does AI play into this?
I think it's great for analytics. I think it's great. Yeah, it's great for analytics, right? It can read data with, I suppose, maybe higher variability than a standard engine could. That, like the MRP is, I consider it an engine. And so I think that's a cool aspect of it, but I think it's useless without foundational, accurate data. Like, again, garbage in, garbage out. It's going to read something. Maybe an aspect of the like AI within MRP is that it can determine outliers. So anything that is inaccurate or incorrect. But I think there's certainly a use case for it. But I've yet to see it work functionally and accurately.
But you're excited about it.
I'm very excited about it.
Because,
yeah.
Okay.
but I'm cautiously optimistic, cautiously excited. I'm keen to see what it does, but I would like to use the tools that I currently have.
Yeah, I've seen, from my personal experiences, it's just AI needs structured data that is accurate for it to make the predictions.
Yeah.
We talked about things about like seasonality.
Yes.
And we spoke about things like your demand plan and breaking that into the bill of materials. It's really good if the structured data is accurate, right? And then it can assist you in this process. But when it's unstructured, and even if the data is inaccurate, it just compounds the issue.
Yeah.
Again, making predictions that is inaccurate.
Exactly.
The engine produces results that doesn't reflect reality.
100%.
Then we just ask Steve again.
Yeah, exactly. Full circle.
No, 100%.
After spending loads of money getting this up to speed, Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for discussing
thank you.
demand planning with me and material resources plans and how it actually affects inventory-based businesses.
Yeah, thank you.